Why can't the poor just pirate software? Hi, everyone. Leo Notenboom here for askleo.com. Here's the question. We all admire your moral stance regarding finding subscribers' passwords, etc., and for your belief that we should pay for software and not use pirated versions. But how do you feel about folks who are desperately poor with no chance in their lifetime of ever reaching even American poverty level income? So this is a question I got actually a long time ago. And yes, indeed, as you know, I do take a fairly hard line against piracy and theft. But this reader wanted to know if poverty might qualify for an exemption of sorts. His note continues. I want to read you the whole thing. A computer friend of mine originally came from Kashmir, an Indian state, which he visits every few years to see his remaining relatives. He told me that on his last visit, he took with him several software programs such as Windows, Office, CAD, and Publisher, which he bought at a local computer store. He then gave them to a techie friend who duplicated hundreds of copies which were sold for no more than $5. The buyers, young people who had become computer literate on old cast-off PCs, were then able to use the programs, especially Excel and Access, and improve their knowledge of the vast resources of Windows. I asked him if he did not consider the use of pirated software a form of theft from Microsoft. And he replied that the average annual earnings for the people of Kashmir might be $200, and the price they paid for a burned disk was often a month's pay, especially for women who might earn a few rupees a day weaving carpets or decorating shawls. I've given it much thought and have concluded that most of us in America live so well that practices do not really impact our standard of living. In other words, if we demanded strict adherence to the laws, those Kashmir users would never be able to save the $125 or so to purchase legal copies. And if they did, it's unlikely they would ever be able to avail themselves of the support advantage since there are no ISPs in many areas of the world. Okay. I have two reactions to this scenario. Theft is still theft, no matter how you look at it. But perhaps more importantly, this kind of theft is simply no longer necessary. The Robin Hood argument says that it's okay to steal from the rich and give to the poor. I suppose there are cases where that becomes true. Food, perhaps. But computer software isn't it. It's still theft, no matter how much the recipients deserve it. And that's part of the argument, that somehow because they are impoverished, they are entitled to cheap or free copies of the software others pay dearly for. I do not agree with the entitlement. The argument is also much like the argument against record companies. They'll never notice. They're not losing any money because they wouldn't have gotten it anyway. That's not the point. Theft is still theft. Wrong is still wrong. Stealing is still stealing. It's not your right to do or justify doing what you want with something that belongs to someone else. You wouldn't apply your logic to, for example, automobiles, would you? Software's no different. Now, there is one difference. It's not that easy to copy a car. So, my question back to you is simply this. Why bother? The scenario you raise is indeed incredibly important. There are millions of people worldwide whose quality of life could be improved by better access to information and the education that these technologies enable. In fact, I believe it is the key to humanity's future. Not only do I believe that theft is not the answer, I also believe it's not necessary. There are now plenty of totally free alternatives that enable the same level of education and opportunities that more expensive commercial software does. Heck, assuming they're running on less than current hardware, many of the free alternatives would be a better fit, given their typically lower hardware requirements. For anyone in this situation, be it here in the United States or elsewhere on the planet, there are so many serviceable free alternatives that I just can't see needing to resort to piracy to provide the education that would benefit those many folks so inclined. Now, I'm not going to accuse your friend of anything because I simply don't know. In the majority of situations, such as you described, the individual doing the copying and distribution is making a profit. Hundreds of copies were sold for only $5 quickly adds up. For someone making a one-time purchase of a package such as Office for, say, $400, illegally selling 200 copies at $5 each doubles the investment. Suddenly, the effort doesn't look quite as altruistic as we think. In fact, I would consider whether somebody doing this, when there are totally free alternatives, might not be taking advantage of the very people he claims to be helping. Again, I'm not accusing, but I say that the reasons to resort to piracy have diminished so greatly that I'd carefully question the motives of those who persist. For those who believe that the pricing model of commercial software vendors is somehow unfair, using the free alternatives is a great way to make a statement as well. Now, there's a common response of late that says corporations deserve it. Somehow the corporations behind these packages are so evil or misguided that they deserve to have their products stolen. Now, I will completely agree that many, if not most, of these corporations could do a much better job of serving their markets, particularly when there is so much disparity in means. But I return to my original statement. Stealing is stealing. Rationalizing it doesn't make it otherwise. The best revenge, if that's what you want to call it, is to not use their software and to encourage others to avoid it as well. Heck, stealing and distributing their software is still growing their market share and increasing everyone's dependence on it in the future. Bottom line, don't steal, don't purchase stolen goods, find free alternatives, they're out there, and you'll be just as well off. Now, I have to throw out a special caveat here for this one because this is such a controversial topic. There are people who feel so strongly, actually on both sides of the arguments, but I know a lot of people disagree with my position. Of course, I'll be reading the comments on this. Please try not to be repetitive. Try not to say something that a dozen people before you have already said. And absolutely do not be abusive in your comments. Those will get removed and potentially get you banned. For updates, for comments, for links related to this topic and more, visit askleo.com/3340. I'm Leo Notenboom. This is askleo.com. Thanks for watching.